Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of The Contrarian. If it's Monday, it must be sports with Pablo Torre. Pablo, welcome back.
Jen, every time I come on, I'm like, oh, we're going to talk about, and it turns out there are a zillion things we could. So I'm here to talk about whatever you'd like.
There you go. Well, I am an English soccer fan, and there were two things that happened this weekend for English soccer fans. One is that Liverpool sealed the championship. The five-time in a row champion Man City just kind of unraveled a little bit this year, maybe a little old, but they certainly deserved it. They went out in style, big celebration. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's not the story I'm most interested in. I am excited about Wrexham. Tell us the story of Wrexham, who they are, who bought them, and this miraculous journey to almost the Premier League, but miraculous nevertheless.
Yeah, I would say that Wrexham embodies a current fascination that has really spread throughout American sports, which is that actually, because of
Yeah.
relegation, because of promotion, which we've talked about in previous weeks, there's a real financial opportunity as well as a cultural opportunity in European soccer to have I would say nothing short of a dream come true. And so, Wrexham, for those not familiar with Welcome to Wrexham and its associated media properties now, I mean, we're talking about, I would say, the one thing Ryan Reynolds is very proud to discuss right now, among many other Hollywood controversies.
Yes.
This is a story that is just unalloyed joy, I would say. And Rob McElhenney from It's Always Sunny, who went in on a team with some other owners and have elevated a lower level English soccer team level after level, going up and up to the point where now they are the patrons, frankly. They are the funders, the attention drivers that have made a difference, really a real difference when it comes to, yes, Wrexham once again in League One. Has elevated once again, Jen.
Exactly.
And look, you're a bigger soccer fan than me, actually. But the broad strokes of this, meaning you can sort of use American currency, cultural and
Yes.
financial, to make a difference at in small towns, basically, has been a
Right.
thing that they have been, I would say, the avatar for, but they're also not alone in this being a thing that Americans are very interested in now.
Correct. And that is one of the stories, which is American money going into European soccer. And there was a time, obviously, when kids were playing soccer, and soccer was still not a well-watched spectator sport in the United States. That has changed. So there is big broadcast money in European soccer. Wrexham, for those of you who don't know, is a poor little Welsh town. It was down on its luck. These two American media stars, for lack of a better word, come in, they buy the team. The team is very suspicious. What are these Americans doing? Are they going to just kind of make and then dump us, raise our hopes? They were not even a professional team. They were below professionally. They were
Yes,
one
yes, yes.
rung below professional. They then went up to what they call League Two, then to League One. And what happened yesterday is they went up to Championship League. And that is the league right below the big guys, right below the Liverpools and the Man Cities and the Man Uniteds. And what is amazing is that at each level, they've been able to go up in 1 year. So each year they've climbed another level, meaning you have to generally finish in the top two or the top three. And it couldn't be any better than a movie because he starts off with these players who aren't even professionals. They don't even get a salary from them. And they move up and up and up. And you can't do that in American sports. You can't buy a single A baseball team and get
Exactly.
to the World Series. It doesn't work that way. So this has this, really kind of nice, fun quality. And for once, the Americans are the good guys in this because they believed in this team. It's
Yeah, yeah. Jen, part of what you're saying, which is so right, is that at first, of course, there's great skepticism and cynicism when the
yes,
Americans come in and they presume we can, it's kind of like, when McKinsey or Bain show up somewhere and you're like, whoa, 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 what are you guys trying to do? Are you guys gonna gut us? Are you guys gonna ruin our culture and pervert, frankly, an heirloom, right?
right.
Multi-generational heirloom. And what's so fascinating is that the teams run by Americans and funded by Americans that have done this well, they all recognize the sanctity of the thing that they are coming in and trying to
Yes.
help. And so I did an interview on my show, actually, with John Green. And John Green, who is an author and the writer of The Fault in Our Stars and now this new book on tuberculosis called Everything is Tuberculosis, he's an incredible figure on the left for sports as well, and also in just general good causes. And he has his own project with AFC Wimbledon, and he's been
Wow.
funding and like helping fund transfers this season. And he also expressed in a similar parallel way, you know, if you respect the locals,
Yes.
there is this beautiful, you know, we in politics, of course, we think all the time about soft power and what does it mean
Yeah.
anymore, right? USAID has been gutted, and
Such
the
a
idea
great
of
point.
like you want to go and find the Americans. That instinct of like look to America for help has been so perverted again by this administration. And so in sports, in these examples, you have the way to do it right. What does soft power look like? It sometimes looks like the sold out stands in Wrexham or
Yes.
at AFC Wimbledon, frankly. They're the best
Exactly.
examples we got right now of exporting American
Right.
values.
We don't have USAID, but we have Wrexham and AFC Wimbledon. So, you know, they can't keep us down. So it is
That's
a
right.
totally feel-good story. So switching to a less feel-good story, we had the NFL draft this week. And one player, Shador Sanders, who is the son of the great Deion Sanders, and who was coached by his father at Colorado, quarterback, was thought to go like maybe he'd be number one, maybe he got number two. Round after round, he finally gets picked up in the fifth round. And of course, Donald Trump has to weigh in because Donald Trump has to weigh in on everything. And because Deion Sanders like once said something nice about him, now Trump loves these people. So what's your sense of why he went so poorly? And also, are we going to now have Donald Trump commenting on every draft, every round? Do we never get a moment of peace and silence from this guy?
Yeah. Unfortunately, to answer your last question first, yes, I think we are now going to hear from him on all of these matters, in part
Oh,
because, and this is a story we reported on my show, Pablo Torre finds out as well. Donald Trump, of course, if only he was able to buy the Buffalo Bills, may never have become president. And there's a
right, I
crazy
know.
story. It's a crazy story, truly, and involves John Bon Jovi and just like these other bidders and how Trump lost out on the Bills. And so he ended up going into politics fundamentally. So the NFL has always been this thing, this club
Yes.
that he has sought to be accepted by and never has. And so we saw this with Kaepernick, of course, but the Deion Sanders thing is so fascinating because when it comes to the team that took Shador Sanders, the Cleveland Browns, truly, Jen, I was thinking about this today as Trump is taking credit for the draft pick, basically, in the fifth round. There is no franchise that reminds me more of the incompetence of our administration than the Cleveland Browns. It is a team where the guy in charge doesn't want to take credit or blame for all of the mistakes made by the people that he hired to work for him. It is an organization where the most resident image is actually that jersey the fans have where there are a zillion quarterbacks on the back instead of just the one name. And that just reminds me, of course, of all of the people that Donald Trump has hired and fired in his cabinets, right? This is a team that has ostensibly this promise of just wait till next year, except they've been waiting for decades. And that, too, feels like a pretty on-the-nose metaphor for all the things and the promises that Trump is making. But Shador Sanders, the reason why he fell is a yes-and kind of a story. As in, yes, the NFL is always, always terrible at evaluating the thing that they care about the most, which is quarterbacks. It's remarkable, right? Tom Brady, pick number 199. Brock Purdy, the last pick in the draft, Mr. Irrelevant. Football history is rife with these examples. So, yes. And when it comes to how Deion Sanders and Shador Sanders handled the pre-draft process, I've been talking to NFL execs all week and trying to figure out, get to the bottom of this, trying to find out about this. And what's clear is that the way they conducted themselves was a real sort of Icarus flying too close to the sun situation. They
Wow.
tried deliberately to shrink the market for Shador Sanders, who was, in their minds, certainly a top 5 pick. And they tried to shrink it so that the teams they didn't want to pick him wouldn't take him. And the problem here is that it worked all too well, to the point where, in fact, no team wanted to take him, because the number one religion of football in general, and this is another yes and, the thing you got to remember, the other thing is that talent is actual leverage. And so let's say Shador Sanders is actually graded out in the minds of these GMs as like a 3rd-round pick or maybe even a 2nd-round pick. If he is behaving like he is your boss in the pre-draft process, they're saying to themselves, this guy is not talented enough to warrant all of the accompanying headaches. And the NFL, of course, as we know, yes, and they are loath to hand power to players. They will do it sometimes, right? Deshaun Watson, famously, infamously, actually, this same franchise, the Browns, they created, I would say, the most cynical, morally compromised, transactional framework in the history of sports. The guy had dozens of sexual misconduct lawsuits levied against him. They traded the entire farm for him, put him in power, basically, because they thought he was talented enough. Again, fill in your parallel to the Trumpian administration.
There you go.
But the point being that if you're good enough, the NFL will bend over backwards to make you feel like you're in charge. And Shador Sanders just wasn't good enough in their minds. And so, yes, this was a media story. Yes, this was a story where certainly you can detect what's it like when a guy who resembles an avatar for like unapologetic Black confidence also becomes this character in the minds of everybody.
Right.
Who is being told you can't behave that way. Yes, and, right? That's also here too. But to me, it's a story about power and how they heat checked their leverage and learned they didn't have nearly enough.
Well, we're going to have to figure out, to carry the metaphor, whether he is a Pete Hegseth or he is a, Colin Powell, who is a great Secretary of Defense. So we are going to find out. So switching gears from our 2-legged friends to our 4-legged friends, we are coming up on the Kentucky Derby. Now, I have to say, as a kid, I loved the Triple Crown. I watched Secretariat, I watched Affirmed and Alador, these great racehorses, and they are magnificent animals. But in the last 10 or 15 years, there have been a spate of scandals, drugging scandals, a spate of broken legs, which requires euthanizing these magnificent animals, cheating scandals, diseases that have run through stables. What has happened to the racing industry? What's wrong? What's going on?
Yeah, I need people to realize that once upon a time, Jen, horse racing was one of the dominant sports in our country. So once upon a time, it was horse racing, it was boxing, it was baseball. That was the Triple Crown of American sport. And now what's happened is, over time, as much as I would like to say that the ethical concerns you have been the thing that has depressed the market power of horse racing, I don't think that's it. I think that exists in parallel, but that's not the reason why the economics of the sport have fallen apart. I think the economics of the sport have fallen apart, frankly, because it became a sport that, as certainly football became ascendant and basketball became ascendant, suffered from a general phenomenon which is quite familiar, which is some things just fall out of vogue.
Yeah.
And it feels antiquated, frankly. And also, when it comes to the other reason why horse racing was always popular, which was the track, which was betting, of course, we live in an era where you can bet on pretty much anything.
Yeah.
And so the novelty even of that has decreased. But I want to not bury the lead, because the lead, I think, is the feeling that your conscience should have when you realize what happens to these animals. And I'm not somebody who considers himself, I'm not going to, as we've seen in sports, by the way, I'm not going to glue my hands to a basketball court with PETA to protest the treatment of animals. I am not that guy. But intellectually, let alone morally, once you see how often these animals are mishandled, mistreated, abused, it's horrifying. It's really horrifying. And it's hard to escape the idea that the people in charge of the sport, as the spotlight has dimmed, have just been acting with ever more reckless abandon
Exactly.
when it comes to the lack of regulations in a state like California, for
Right.
instance. There is no shortage of stories that remind you that this is something that we shouldn't be eager to support. Certainly not anymore.
Exactly. I think two things stand out to me. First of all, just like we all grew up with elephants in the circus, and we thought, oh, these PETA people complaining, yeah, would let the kids watch the elephants. And then they made their point that these elephants were hugely abused and it's no place for an elephant. And you wonder if some of that is happening in horse racing. And the other part, as you say, you can bet on anything. And sports betting is omnipresent. I'm watching a tennis match. The Monte Carlo 1,000 point tennis match. And the odds are coming up on the screen, and you can bet on the tennis match. You can bet at the beginning of the match. You can bet after the first, set. It is everywhere. How do you feel about this kind of betting is everywhere? Does it seem like an intrusion? Does it seem weird to you, or is that just part of the landscape now?
Yeah, my personal view is that sports betting should be federally legalized and regulated. I think that, like a lot of would-be vices, it's something that deserves sunlight as opposed to shoving it off into a corner. And currently,
Right.
the piecemeal way it's been introduced has been
Right.
messy. That's the most generous term I would use for it. It's also been fraught, right? And I think when it comes to, and I think about this, frankly, in terms of, and I'll make an analogy here to football and CTE. And so just bear with me for a second, because in football, of course, there has been lots of great investigative journalism about how the risks were not disclosed to the players
Right.
when it came to what they were signing up for. And so the way I think about anything with that level of danger is, first and foremost, are we disclosing the risks to the consenting adults such
Right.
that they can opt in with full knowledge of what the harms might be?
Right.
And if we do that, and the sport is then regulated from the larger medical science perspective, whether it's addiction or concussions, once it's regulated inside of that framework, then yes, if you choose to do it, good for you. I am somebody who still, I'll watch boxing, as fraught as that is, because there is some understanding of you have signed up for legalized concussions, right? If you're signing up for legalized sports betting, so too am I okay with it, so long as everybody's aware of the costs and benefits. But in the meantime, Jen, what I want to point out to you is that I would wager, as it were, that the people who watch the Monte Carlo tennis match that you are watching, it's the most hardcore sports fans and gamblers.
Exactly.
Jen Rubin surrounded by gamblers. That's what's funny to me about you being a sports fan like this. It's that's how the economy is drawing
Exactly.
its power, really, at this point, at the lower levels.
Exactly. And what's really horrifying about it is they know exactly what they do. This concept that they give free bets, they give you $1,000 of free bets or whatever the number is. That's exactly how you hook the people who eventually have a gambling problem. And so you're right. I think regulation is required. And frankly, I don't think some of those tennis bets are right after watching them. I don't think they figured out clay court tennis. So there's some good bets to be had there.
Yeah.
So I would be remiss, although still horrified, if I didn't mention that very weird interview with Bill Belichick.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, the esteemed former coach of the New England Patriots, who shows up in this raggedy t-shirt. Okay, I'm one to criticize, but at least I don't have holes in my shirt. We come fully dressed.
Correct.
And he is asked about, I don't know, he's in his 70s, I think. He's asked about how did he meet his 24-year-old girlfriend. And then she pipes up and tells him not to answer that question. And apparently this happened a couple times. What is going on with Bill Belichick? What is this?
It's one of my favorite stories. I am proud to say that Pablo Torre finds out, we broke the story that Jordan Hudson, the 24-year-old in question, is basically
Yes,
acting as Bill Belichick's momager, which is to say that it's kind of like when Kris Jenner started orchestrating as a mom and manager and agent and representative and CEO
yes.
the lives of the Kardashians. That's what we're seeing, with the added delicious twist for everybody who's a sports fan of knowing that 73-year-old Bill Belichick, who was, Jen, and I can't stress this enough, the least media friendly person in the
Yes,
history of coaching, is
right.
now the guy who is being, you know, managed, momaged in this way into performing in public in a way that has been so remarkable to witness. And so, what I've not, I mean, that story, the 60 Minutes interview, sorry, the CBS interview, it's not the only case study here. What I reported is that actually, you may recall from the Super Bowl when Bill Belichick was in that Dunkin' Donuts commercial. And also in the background, by the way, this is like the Affleck Damon commercial. In the background was Jordan Hudson. And what I was told, what I reported was that Jordan Hudson, in the negotiations for Bill Belichick to be in that commercial, was acting as his agent. She was the representative that the people making this big Super Bowl commercial had to go through. And I've since heard across the board when it came to the podcast that Belichick was hosting at one point, she was the person that you had to go through. When it came to this, she was on set, piping up with, by the way, I did appreciate that there are some things at age 24 that you probably haven't learned quite yet about how to manage the media in this regard. Like maybe if you're sitting next to the actual producer watching the monitor, the camera might also catch you in the shot.
Exactly.
So I firmly believe that she did not intend to be on screen in that way. But I am so glad that CBS included it, and in fact could have included more apparently, because she has been in all of these ways, Instagram, broadcast television, the internet, as Belichick is out here coaching North Carolina and also being more media available than ever. She's the one who explains why and how he is, holding her up on the beach on Instagram. And so that story, by the way, of like, how did they meet? I mean, the story that I had heard is that they met on a plane. And this is, I think, let's just call it, this is the Jordan Hudson approved version.
Yeah.
So this is what is from her. They met on a plane randomly. He didn't know her. She knew of him. She apparently was studying philosophy. He inscribed a book she was reading, signing it, Coach Belichick, whatever, and they hit it off. That's the origin story. It was a kind of a meet cute on a plane.
Right.
But
I was reading
will say,
philosophy. I'll have to
yeah,
remember that. I was reading
yeah,
philosophy.
a real sleepless in Seattle situation, clearly. But the more that she talks and the more that she shows up, the more skepticism I have around what else was behind this meet cute, because it seems so orchestrated in a way that raises new suspicions from me, as well as it seems everybody else in media now.
It is. It is. Well, sports is nothing if not fascinating. We've gone from horses to soccer to Bill Belichick to the NFL draft. We've covered the waterfront once again, Pablo. It is always great seeing you. It is always fun. And I still love your background. It's psychedelic. It's just like you, shining, interesting, diverse,
Yes. When I think about Bill Belichick's relationship, it looks and feels like I'm on drugs. So this is, I think, appropriate to showcase my reporting. Yeah.
There you go. Well, thanks so much. We'll be back next week and another week of sports. Looking forward to it. Take care.